How are our societies going to reduce energy consumption and at the same time improve resilience while also being democratic? As a certified gardener, I suggest adopting the plant as model for our cities, and in this video I will emojify why. But first I want to point out that from Plato's Republic to Le Corbusier's Urbanisme, cities and states here in the West arguably have been modeled on the human being, its mental faculties, its proportions, its biology. And today, on a systemic level, cities indeed do function a lot like a biological human being, and here are a few examples. Humans are heterotroph, meaning food from outside. This refers to the fact that humans by themselves are unable to produce the necessary biological compounds they need to maintain homeostasis. Instead, the human has to obtain these biological compounds from its environment. This corresponds to today's cities, which daily need to import not only food, but other biological compounds like oil and oil derivatives from outside. Compared to plants, the human metabolism is high, meaning high energy consumption and high waste production. This also corresponds to today's energy-hungry and wasteful cities. Human biology is regulated and maintained by a large number of highly specialized organs. Today's cities too are regulated and maintained by a very large number of highly specialized institutions. The many organs in humans allow for a much higher level of activity than plants, but it comes with a price. Beyond the ongoing need for food from somewhere, a failure in a single of the vital organs at any given time is usually deadly to a human being. This translates into the problem of low resilience in today's hypercomplex cities, and there are many critical institutions that constantly must supply and regulate them. Finally, humans have a central, highly complex and energy-demanding organ, the brain, to regulate the other organs. The institutions of today's cities, in a similar way, are ruled and regulated by the highly complex and energy-demanding central institution of the representative democratic state. Both the brain and the state is there to make decisions for the good of the entire system, but just like the human brain can misinterpret or ignore the body's needs, the state can also misunderstand or ignore the needs of its citizens. And so we find the complex relationship in human biology between brain and body mirrored in the complex relationship between the representative democratic state and the inhabitants in the cities of today. These are just some examples of the systemic ways today's cities function like a human being. And because of this, and for ease of reference, I'll call this typical city of today Anthropolis, after anthropos meaning human and polis meaning city. The public debate in Anthropolis on sustainable cities stays within its own humanoid and heterotroph framework as long as change is only thought of as a replacement of the external, fossil and finite source of food and energy with a renewable and infinite but still external source. This while the high number of institutions we have today remains unchanged. From the point of view of biological systems, this urban life form is not likely to succeed. Which is why I suggest adopting the plant as model for our cities instead, even if it entails a very different city life from today. I'll call the city modeled after the plant Phytopolis, after phytos, which means plant, and here are a couple of examples of how it mimics the plant on a systemic level with regard to energy, resilience, and democracy. First of all, a plant is not heterotroph like a human, it is autotroph, meaning self-made food. This refers to the fact that a plant by itself is able to produce the necessary biological compounds it needs to maintain homeostasis. A plant can do this because the typical plant cell unlike any human cell, contains chlorophyll, in which the process of photosynthesis happens. This process requires only the inorganic inputs of sunlight, water, carbon from the air, and a limited number of mostly abundantly available mineral salts from the earth. Just like the typical plant cell contains chlorophyll, the typical city block in Phytopolis contains large urban gardening grow systems, which together with a host of recycling and other systems enables the city block to produce the biological compounds needed to provide for its own inhabitants from only inorganic inputs, and under normal circumstances produce a surplus for growth, storage, and exchange with the rest of the city. The citizens in Phytopolis typically live and work in the same city block, together maintaining all the homeostatic and metabolic functions of these systems and the entire city block, with mechanical, chemical, and other technologies as fine-tuned and as specialized as the inner workings of a living plant cell. Because of this, Phytopolis has no need for imports of organic compounds like food, oil, or oil derivatives. The massive extraction system and infrastructure to enable these imports, including the system of industrial farming, which supports Anthropolis, is not needed, just as the entire system for personal transport is scaled down to mostly paths, tunnels, and bridges for walking and bicycling, leaving a lot of space for gardens and trees. Compared to a human, the metabolism of a plant is low, meaning low energy consumption and low waste production. And it is the same in Phytopolis, where the energy availability necessarily is much lower than in Anthropolis. But just like plants are undeniably alive and at their own pace are able to sense, communicate, make decisions, evolve, and thrive, so too is and can Phytopolis. In human biology, the essential homeostatic functions are regulated by a long list of constantly active organs. The plant employs more passive technologies instead, and the regulation of essential homeostatic functions are distributed at the cellular and tissue level in its three basic organs of root, stem, and leaf. Phytopolis mimics this at the level of the city block and in networks of city blocks, comprising the entire city. This means widespread use of passive technologies and that the essential societal and civic functions of the many centralized institutions we know from Anthropolis are reconfigured and localized inside the city block and into networks of city blocks, including the institutions which today deal with food, energy and water management, maintenance of buildings and infrastructure, healthcare, social welfare, education, public safety, and so on. By not relying on external sources of biological compounds and by being much less complex and more distributed in its organization, Phytopolis is resilient to a lot of the dangers which threatens Anthropolis, like disruptions in one of the innumerable supply chains, or the breakdown in just one critical institution, which threatens to destabilize the entire society. Plants collectively have a long list of strategies which enable them to survive and thrive in the most diverse conditions, and a lot of these are available to be scaled and employed in Phytopolis according to the needs of an uncertain future. Finally, with regard to democracy, it is clear that Phytopolis does not have a specialized, complex, and energy-hungry institution like the modern representative democratic state, just as plants neither can support nor need a brain. But representative democracy is not the only kind of democracy there is, and in the West, at the beginning of our history, before Plato's idea for a just state, and before the human model overtook our conceptions of what a city, a polis, and a politeia is or can be, we had a pre-modern, non-representative democratic system which, by coincidence or some other reason, perfectly fits with the plant cell-like city blocks of Phytopolis and the distributed nature of the basic societal and civic functions therein. And that is the democratic system of the city-state of Athens, particularly after the reforms of Cleisthenes 508 BC. In these reforms, the deme, which already was the primary agricultural and social unit of the city, was given formal power and became the primary judicial and political unit of the city as well. This was the essential democratic move, as it broke the power of a few families which until then had wielded a disproportionate influence on the city, by instead connecting power with people and place in the deme. This move is remade in Phytopolis with an adjusted and scaled implementation of the political and judicial system of the original democracy of the West with the city block as deme. This system would need the same high level of civic engagement as Athens had, but in Phytopolis it would in large part be implemented on a low-voltage citywide electronic network mimicking the low-voltage electric signals in plants. These are a few examples of the systemic ways the city of Phytopolis mimics a plant, and why adopting the plant instead of the human as model for our cities could decrease energy consumption, raise the level of resilience, and at the same time be a great reset for our democracy. Thanks for watching.